Hi there. Thank you everybody for being here today. My name is Dana and I'm the Director of Experiential Learning with the Impart Investigator team. I'm pleased today to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Keith Brunt. Gonna let someone in. So Dr. Keith Brunt is an associate professor of the Department of Pharmacology in the Faculty of Medicine at Dalhousie University, an adjunct professor in the Faculty of Business at the University of New Brunswick, a translational scientist at the New Brunswick Heart Center of the St. John Regional Hospital, and a chief scientific officer of MBBM Inc., which is a knowledge brokerage firm. As a natural scientist with a fascination for primordial molecules like heme and their regulatory networks, letting Ken in, Dr. Brunt draws inspiration from nature and translates this excitement for science to inspire trainees as future innovators and explorers of biology. This enables his team to derive lessons from naturally occurring physiological mechanisms to design experimental therapeutics and other medical innovations. Dr. Brunt is the co-founder and current financial director of a successful research and innovation development program of the Impart Investigator Team Canada, which helps connect academic, clinical, public service, and commercial enterprises in collaboration to improve outcomes of patients, stakeholders, and investors. Dr. Brunt is a translational scientist specialized in identifying or developing solutions from the fundamental sciences and engineering sectors that can address the unmet medical needs of patients, physicians, and commercial enterprises while continuing to inspire trainees in innovation. As a researcher, Dr. Brunt is passionate about improving quality of life and establishing efficiency in healthcare operations, the health of people, the environment, and the environment in which we live in. Consistently sought out by medical devices, biotechnology, therapeutic, medical investment, and economic development firms for his medical market strategy expertise, Dr. Brunt's special focus is into the future of translational medicine and health innovation, which are highly valued both academically, commercially, and by the government. Now, without further ado, Dr. Brunt, take the floor.
Thank you. What a wonderful introduction, and I'll just add that I'm also a big fan of cats. So if you see a few of the cats walking by, that's why. It was so great to be invited to give this talk to sort of kick off Research Reels under the My Road initiative. It's even better that this whole talk is actually driven and decided by most of you who asked questions prior related to how to get into medical research. So I just want to tell you a little bit about some of the activities that are going on, and you might see this symbol called My Road. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today is you're probably all on a road to medical research in some way or some form. Maybe you're in high school or maybe you're a PhD student. It doesn't really matter. We're all on the same kind of discovery, road of discovery. Now, My Road is an initiative under the Health Research and Training Program that was launched last year. And Impart, along with several other organizations, have joined together under the CHR funding model to help promote sort of sessions like this, to help everybody kind of understand and navigate, how do I get into medical research? Or what if I don't have a friend next door who happens to be a professor or a clinician in my family who does medical research? Where do I get started? So I'm really excited to present today a little bit, which I call a primer to recognizing the road you're probably already on, and hopefully help you navigate to it. So I invite you to come to the Impart webpage or come to the myroad.ca webpage and help discover some of the things that we'll be creating and innovating around connecting with you. So I'm just going to start off my first slide here. Hopefully we can get it. Now, the interesting thing was Dana gave me a list of questions from everybody. And so the first thing I had to do was try to imagine, how am I going to compile these questions? So I actually used a research technique, qualitative science, and I sort of created a theme around the questions. And so I consolidated questions into what I think are 5 common questions. And they're listed here. I'm not going to read them out to you, but I'm going to touch on a few of them. And what I would invite you to do is, during any of this presentation, I want you to think, maybe there's some other question, or maybe you didn't really follow what I was suggesting. Write that question down into the chat or send it in an email to research@impartteam.ca, and maybe we'll have another one of these sessions. So let's dive right in. Let's explore what My Road is. So my road to research actually wasn't planned. I left high school thinking I was going to be a chiropractor, not a professor. Um, but there was something that when I look back to my own road, my journey, it started in high school. I actually really enjoyed biology and chem labs, and there were science fairs, and I remember my very first scientific experiment completely blew up because I got the order of chemicals wrong. I was trying to make a polymer, and I ended up making formaldehyde gas, choking out half the poor people in the audience of the auditorium. Uh, Undeterred, I still kind of enjoyed the scientific realm, and when I got into university, I really enjoyed labs, and I felt like I was pretty good at the labs, and really wanted to make sure that I got a good grade. And so oftentimes what we think is our road to science or to research is going to be a straight road where you go from high school to university, university to grad school, and on. But the reality is many of us take turns in that road. Some of us might have a flat road that looks really nice, like this top picture here, where there's, flat couple turns. My road kind of felt more like this, that I started in the bottom of a valley, I was twisting and turning, and I felt like I was going uphill all the way. And just when I got to be a professor, I thought, yeah, I'm now a professor. I got an academic appointment, and I just felt like I went right back to the beginning and had to relearn how to do so much and so many different things. So what I would say is your road is uniquely your own. There's going to be people that are going to offer you a lift. They're going to give you directions. They might hitchhike with you. There's going to be some roadblocks, but there's also going to be on and off ramps, forks, and it's a journey, and it's really understanding that the journey is the destination of being a researcher. So what I would encourage all of you to do is not so much be worried about what's going to happen in the future and how you're going to get to that next thing and the next thing and the next thing, but really invest in being present in the now of what you're asking as a question. What are you interested in? But, touching on what you're interested in might be harder than you think, because you don't know the full spectrum of science. And it's really important to recognize that science is a spectrum. So when I saw the questions related to how do I get started, how do I find the right topic, how do I find the right lab, I really stopped to think, and I realized that, some of us often develop word of mouth. That can often begin in a lecture where you really enjoy a certain subject or a certain professor, and you approach that professor. So again, I'll tell you something. I really like biochemistry and molecular biology, and I remember approaching a professor at the end of a lecture, and I said, "Hey, I really like this material. I like the idea of genetics and all of this. Could I come work in your lab maybe in the summer?" And he turned around to me and he said, "No." And I was a little disheartened at the time, but realizing that maybe I hadn't given much thought into, what that professor's lab was about, and it wasn't necessarily about the lecture that they were teaching on. So, you know, eventually I did find another professor, and I really enjoyed what they were working on. But at the same time, they didn't necessarily have the resources to bring me into the lab right away. So I offered to volunteer. I actually got my start in a lab cleaning turtle cages and feeding frogs, just so I had the chance to sort of hang out in the lab and pick up some methods. And so I actually found that really encouraging. Now, again, I wasn't planning on becoming a scientist. So what I would recommend that you do is sort of look locally around you, get to know people, maybe find a graduate student or somebody who's a couple years ahead of you, ask them what they're thinking about. You can start locally by, exploring the hospitals or the universities, often talking to peers or professors for some advice or guidance. One of the key tricks that I think a lot of grad students or undergrads, when they're looking for honors projects or maybe a thesis, maybe changing from their master's to their PhD thesis, is to go discover where the funding comes from for science. And that comes predominantly from what we call the tri-councils, which are CIHR, NSERC, and SSHRC, which are all acronyms, and there's a lot of acronyms in science, but these tri-councils fund the grants and they fund many of the scholarships. What's interesting is you can actually navigate to the announcements of where those grants are being funded. So you can actually look at all of last year's funding that went to your university. So you can find professors who recently got grants. And I will tell you one thing, when you get a grant, you're almost invariably going to be looking for scientists to join your program. So it's a great time to reach out to that scientist or learn a little bit more about what they're doing. And there's so much diversity out there, from basic science all the way to clinical research projects in the humanities. So, you really can look at different opportunities in that way. Now, another good place to look is internally. Ask yourself a little bit, what's my learning style? What are my favorite subjects? And do you have any lived experience? And what we mean by lived experience is maybe you've encountered in your family somebody who had cancer or somebody who had a heart attack. Maybe that is inspiring to you. Or maybe you're just genuinely interested in a certain industrial setting like pharmacology. Or you're just really good at biochemistry and you got a 90 in the course and you say, biochemistry is awesome, I want to do that. So once you know a little bit more about what your interests are, what your experiences are, what motivates you, I think you can reach out to other labs or the trainees in labs where there's an alignment. One of the things that you also want to look for is opportunities between classes, right? So whether that's an honors project in undergrad or a summer studentship. And so search out opportunities. What we're going to try to do in the My Road initiative is try to compile where to find these opportunities. And often we find that students look for opportunities about this time of year in the summer. They're like, wow, I just finished this second year or first year of university. I really think I might want to go into grad school in the future. I might want to try my hand at science. And so they look for summer studentships. The most important message here for the undergrads and for high school students looking for summer studentships is this: you need to look in the fall for the next year. Often, most of those studentship programming are offered as application-based. You have to, submit your grades and a research proposal. You have to have a mentor identified. And then what you do is you're applying sometimes as early as October for that summer studentship to start in May through to August. So when students are reaching out to me about this time of year, May and June, I'm usually saying, hey, I'm sorry, but I've already committed to summer students and we've already applied for scholarships and studentships. So start early and look diversely. I think one of the other questions that I really struck me, and there was a few different ways of people asking the same question, is what qualities or skills are professors actually looking for in these new trainees or collaborators? And I think it was important to kind of recognize that, a scientist is everybody. It doesn't matter where you're from, rich, poor, doesn't matter what country you're from. It's just a unique feature of all of us that we kind of like to observe, and we have inherent curiosity. We like talking about ideas that we have. We like hearing about what other people are doing in research, or we really love finding out that what we read in the textbooks isn't exactly right or is based on kind of thin information, and there's a lot of gaps. And once you realize that that is a truth about a lot of what we learned in high school and undergrad, you start to realize, hey, I can actually contribute to those textbooks. Maybe I want to do that. So what are professors looking for? Well, they look to find the right balance in their own personalities. So I like to find students that aren't exactly like me. I like to find students that are maybe a little bit more methodical, a little bit more introverted, or a little bit more analytical than I am, and very careful in their reasoning, whereas I tend to be a little bit more chaotic. But a lot of commonalities exist. So drive. Are you driven to achieve things in science? Do you have a specific goal in mind in your life, or even just a sector where you think you might want to wind up? Maybe that's in medicine, maybe that's in science, maybe it's working in government. But whatever it is you're looking scientifically at, do you have a passion for it? Do you have a passion and a curiosity that sort of moves you forward? And maybe one of the other things to consider is, do you have an empathy? And what I mean by empathy is you can recognize that healthcare is imperfect. Medicine is imperfect. There's gaps and there's knowledge that we don't have. We can't help everybody, and we certainly can't cure everybody. So understanding that, these questions, these research questions, these problems or frustrations that might be out there, really research and scientific exploration is a way to solve them. And wanting to be a part of that for good reasons is a great place to start. Communicating that is also the next thing. I think the other elements that tend to feature large in summer studentships or scholarships, or just getting the attention of people who are able to mentor or supervise you, is a degree of perseverance. So science is hard. We make mistakes all the time in the lab. We flub up experiments. Sometimes the experiment should work a certain way and it doesn't, and we have to kind of do what we call troubleshooting. There's also a lot of rejection, right? You don't get the scholarship, you don't get the summer studentship, you're told no. And so you can't take it personally. It's hard to say that, or it's hard to feel like you're not taking something personally when you're rejected or told you can't come in, or maybe not now, or my lab's full. But being resilient, just pushing through and saying, look, I'm going to find somebody close to my interests who needs me, much like I need them. And so you'll find some quid pro quo at some point. So overcoming that rejection, persevering in the light of not getting something the way you'd hoped. Just remember, there's those on ramps and off ramps, and there's ways to get back into a certain area. So you're not locked in. If you're going to learn certain skills in one lab, maybe the next lab you go to, you're going to learn different skills. There's also a degree of humility to evidence. It's really understanding that we don't know everything. We can't possibly know everything there is about how the body works or how science works even. And the skills that we use and how we use them, often there are better skills or more skilled or smarter people who've already paved the way. So it's approaching a research question with humility is a good strategy. Eventually, we expect to see some technical proficiency, but I know in the early days, that's a bit challenging. But technical proficiency can start with just one technique. Maybe you learn how to do histology, or maybe how to feed frogs carefully. It doesn't really matter so long as that skill that you're learning that helps with science, you're really committed to mastering it and becoming very good at it. So good at it that you can share that skill with others. That's the degree of technical proficiency that will be really attractive, even if it's just one skill, because we can build on that skill and build on that technique by adding others. Educational achievements are also important, but it's more than just getting a good high GPA. It's, becoming a researcher is a commitment to sort of transforming yourself, the way you think, the way you receive knowledge, the way you question what people tell you, and how many different people you ask the same question to formulate your own opinion, and then how you go test that to see if that's going to work out. But overall, we're looking for somebody that, has time, experience, or expertise, or the resources to help us out on our path. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for someone who can spare that time, has some experience, has a team around them, and the resources to help you grow. So in exchange for that, you're going to give them drive and passion and curiosity, and you're going to challenge them. And that's the fun part about being in a medical research lab. So don't be shy to ask more questions about how you make that first step. You don't always have to reach out to the professor either. You can reach out to their trainees. I think that's a great move. And so that kind of led to this next question, which is, what is mentoring? What am I expecting to get out of mentoring? What am I contributing? Am I part of the mentorship team? Absolutely, you are. The whole research team is mentoring each other, either peer-to-peer, or maybe there's a junior trainee that you're helping at the bench teach a technique, or you're going to the professor to learn the big picture of what small project you're doing with them. But at some point, you're wanting to connect and you're wanting to build that rapport either with the professor or with their labs. You're going to start locally. Maybe you'll go nationally and internationally over time. You might be in the country or you might be outside of the country looking to connect. And so there's a couple tricks and trades there. You definitely want to show interest in whatever lab you're approaching. I don't mean just say, oh, I'm interested in pharmacology. I think it's a career for me. I mean, have you read a paper from that person's lab or asked to read a paper that relates to a project that might be ongoing? Have you found out what grants they hold and what those grants sometimes have abstracts when they're announced? Doing a little detective work about the lab that you're interested in advance can be very, very helpful. Another thing to look for is, are they on social media, or is their research group like Impart or MyRoad on social media? Can you give them a follow and learn a little bit more about what their mission and objectives are? There's some opportunities out there to volunteer or intern before you get a paid summer studentship, or you might be looking at some method development. And so many universities are offering what we call experiential learning. So these can be research boot camps, or these can be special methods training that go on alongside labs or along courses. Then the most common one is an honors project or an honors thesis. So most grad programs are looking for an honors project, which is typically done in the fourth year. But well before the fourth year, science can start at any time. It can start in high school, it can start in first year. There's no rules to how or when you can start being involved with a research team. Definitely ask people about scholarship opportunities early. too many bursaries and scholarships go unclaimed by students because they're simply not aware. You can reach out to the university guidance office. They have lists of scholarships, and you can look up locally, what hospitals or research foundations are offering studentships and scholarships. Something I eventually want to communicate to you is it's really important not to rely on what we call low-level communication. An email, for example, is an effective form of communication in some ways, well crafted and well delivered, but it's also a low form of communication because I don't get to see or understand who you are. And professors get tons of emails, on average, anywhere from 50 to 100 emails a day coming through. So if you're relying only on that first email to translate into an offer, you're going to be disappointed. Use the email to set up something in person, either an in-office visit or a virtual visit if you live far away. Get a 30-minute request just to talk about what science is going on in their lab and tell that professor a little bit about yourself. That personal connection or in-person communication is super, super important for connecting. You'll also learn a little bit more about what you need from that professor. Maybe it's a letter of reference, maybe it's an opportunity, maybe it's a research project that's in their lab that will help you write a scholarship application or summer studentship application. And you'll also learn a little bit more about what you want from them by discussing, what can I expect when I come work in your lab? If you expect the professor to be at the bench with you 9 to 5, 5 days a week, you might be a little bit disappointed if you come work for me. But independent learners are great, and a lot of lateral learning happens. We record a lot of method development. We have protocols, SOPs established in the lab, and we have staff and other students, and we learn from each other as we go. So absolutely, having that face time is important with your mentors, but realizing mentorship's a team-based activity is also important. Knowing when to ask for help and guidance or feedback is also really important. And the last thing, I can't emphasize this enough, if you get a rejection or a no, ask for a referral. Ask them if somebody else is looking for a student that they know, or if there's a similar lab or group. I often will refer people to labs that I know just got funding or are looking for graduate students. Professors talk and they're looking for people sometimes, and so we know certain people just started. Maybe they don't even have a web page yet on the university faculty page. So there's great opportunities if you exercise a little bit of that humility. We have to also, as professors, exercise that humility. We can't offer a position to everybody, but we absolutely want and desire to guide you appropriately. So mentoring is a complex, bi-directional exchange of information and skill sets. So it's complicated, but it's always about improving, our community of learners and scholars. Another question I thought was really interesting, which we kind of distilled down, was how do I get research experience? If I don't get that offer right away to come into the lab, how else can I get experience or skills? And there was a few questions that the people submitted also around, well, I'm already in your grad school program. How do I get experience outside my lab with skills that maybe aren't an offer in my lab or professional development that might be outside the lab? And I thought that was really an important question because there are hard skills and there are soft skills in medical research that are really important. Communication being one of them, writing, problem solving, project management, just even understanding budgeting and human resources can be hugely valuable. There's lots of growing micro-credentialing activities that are out there. And one of the things that we're collecting on the My Road initiative is to identify these within our partnership organizations and around the country. But you can start small. Maybe you're in high school, maybe you're just in first year university. Do you have your chemical safety and your biosafety, or maybe your clinical requirements for working in a clinical setting? So TCPS2, the Tri-Council Policy Statement for patient research. If you have some of those early certifications, great. It just helps show that you're committed to sort of being in a research program. And if you need guidance or advice, ask, whoever you're talking to for more. You can also do things like write a one-page with citations summary of what you think you'd like to work on and why you think it's important. There's a lot of opportunities out there. We're trying to map some of these to help navigate people towards some of the special training. So in grad school and post-grad, there's special training also at research cores or research centers and institutes, from the NRC to Cold Spring Harbor, that can give you really advanced techniques on a very condensed short time window from a week to 2 weeks. You can become certified as an expert in flow cytometry or animal surgeries. My road is also going to be offering lab exchanges. So this is where a student in one person's lab at one institute can go travel to another person in the network's lab and learn a technique or learn how to apply their techniques in that other person's program. It's a great way to network and maybe even scout out where you might want to do your next step in your research path, whether that's a master's student becoming a PhD or PhD going off to a postdoc. It's a great way we think will help connect and navigate student activities. But every university out there will usually have some sort of experiential learning opportunity. At Dalhousie, we have what's called Research Summer Camp. This is a great micro-credentialing, certificate-based online learning. Some of it's self-directed, some of it's taught, but it gives you certificates that you can put on your CV that will help you research, collate information in citation management software, how to formulate research questions or research proposals, and they'll really help you with sort of developing the critical thinking skills that will complement your education and help build sort of what we call problem solving or reading skills. There's also great public data out there, and some of that is in CIHI, Canadian Institutes of Health Information. It's public data, it's constantly updating. Some of it is molecular data from researchers on RNA sequencing. And so learning how to do bioinformatics at any point is a huge plus in this world of big data sets. And you can always apply that in any lab by simply finding the studies or the patient populations that you're interested in and working those methods into your research program. So definitely reach out to the research at Impart for guidance if you want to help find this. On our training webpage, Dana has already started an amazing list of where to go and how to get there, kind of links to training with all sorts of different applications, from flow cytometry to clinical trials. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, and I encourage you to look for those opportunities as preparation or as professional development alongside your work, because adding those little micro credentials can go a long way to making you very attractive for scholarship or for employment. So another question that came up was in relation to, what if I'm already a medical professional? So what if I'm a pharmacist or a physician? What if I'm an occupational therapist? As a medical professional, where can I get started into medical research? Or how might I translate some of the research that's going on around me into my own practice? And I thought this was interesting for a lot of reasons, because it reminds us that the road that we take can wind back on itself. So it's not uncommon for people to become a nurse, go to grad school, go into medicine, go get their PhD, do a fellowship, go back to nursing professorships, and go full circle. And it's not necessarily a clear and linear path that you're on. It's letting the data, letting the research questions guide you, and really allowing that passion and that drive to lead you forward is so important. You should never feel that because I don't have a PhD, I can't be an active and productive researcher. Absolutely. Some of the best researchers that I've met are veterinarians, pharmacists, physicians who have no graduate training whatsoever. So if you're a healthcare professional and you don't have formalized graduate research education, no problem. There's a term for that. It's called being a good knowledge user. And one of the important things about being a good knowledge user is you can inform others about what you've seen and what you've learned and what you've lived as a healthcare provider. Even if you're a patient, your lived experience as a patient can be instrumental to research question design. And we have these programs called patient partnerships. Many of the research charities that are out there are looking for patient partners. So if you're a patient with lived experience, you can be part of the research team too. So as a health professional, I would encourage you to join a research group. If you're a patient participant or patient with lived experience, I encourage you to find the associated research charity or research groups that exist out there. And on this picture on the right, these are just some of the research groups that I belong to. Of course, clinical and basic researchers collide in the CoverNB and DAL crew. I also dabble a little bit in the interspace between the molecular mechanisms and experimental therapeutics that I work on for cardiovascular or cancer. I even work with physical scientists in nanotechnology as a member of the Nano Atlantic, using some of the nanoparticle therapeutics either in diagnostics for cancer or cardiovascular disease or in therapeutic delivery. And of course, as far as diseases go, I don't want to be necessarily limited to one type of disease if I can help contribute to a group collective. And so the IMPART team studies diseases related to inflammation and metabolism, the physical ability and recovery of patients. So they're really research translationalists working with companies, working with policymakers to try to figure out how to make the most out of improving the outcomes and quality of life. There's also dedicated specific patient research organizations like the MSSU SPORE. So if you're a medical professional and you don't know what the strategy for patient-oriented researcher is, I encourage you to research that, learn a little bit about it. They're great at sort of knowledge translation and mobilization projects. They'll help, you develop and cross-check guideline expectations with clinical guidelines to what you might be experiencing in your own practice. But one of the important things is to really consider that no matter whether you're a patient or you're a healthcare provider or you're a researcher asking questions of the same, look for frustration. Look for where the healthcare system is not working well. People are frustrated. Maybe as a physician, you're frustrated because you can't help a certain patient beyond a certain point in time because there's no options left to you. Well, gathering those frustrations together really give us the ammunition that we need to formulate good research questions. And there are no small questions in research. Once we create those research questions together, we can form teams, and clinician scientists make great team members, and we can start thinking of our practices and our patients as assets to help facilitate research and the solution providing that we ultimately do as researchers to sort of come up with new and novel ways to address and tackle that. More than anything, every citizen out there can be a champion for research because research is how we get the solutions to improve healthcare. So as our population gets older and we're benefiting from the success of science, new research opportunities and new frustrations will inevitably show up. So it's a never-ending journey of science, and I'm super excited to have had just this limited chance to talk to you about it. I think 5 questions is not nearly enough time to cover everything, so I wanted to leave extra time for us if we could maybe throw some extra questions that came in later. But I also wanted to just emphasize that this is the start of your road. Maybe it's the middle. It's taking an on-ramp or an off-ramp to another opportunity. Whatever it is, the encouragement I would give you is that the My Road initiative that's been launched by the Health and Research Training Platforms by CHR, of which IMPART's a partner, are going to help guide you there, whether that's a lab exchange, whether it's identifying potential mentors, whether it's simply answering questions that you ask or asking others the right questions to guide you. Certificates are great, degrees are great, and everybody has a right and a purpose and a place in the research continuum. So hopefully My Road will help you discover your road to research and help you navigate it a little bit better. And we definitely need you to impart a better future with us. And that's a play on words because we want you to be a part of IMPART. So reach out, help, volunteer, join the social media platform, share and like the activities that we're doing. And of course, just come explore the path that's ahead of you. Reach out and ask questions later by email or right now if you'd like.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith. That was a very good, well put presentation that answered, I think, most of the questions that we had. I mean, I couldn't have done that any better. I think that was very easy to follow through too. I'm going to open the floor for any questions that you guys have, or ones that you've submitted, or yeah. I think one of the ones that came in a bit later, Keith, that was a bit of a tricky one too. It said, what is a common misconception that you think students usually have about doing medical research?
Ooh, just one?
No.
I think sometimes one misconception is that medical research is, you know, restricted in some way to physicians or to people in a medical school. That's not at all the case. So when we think about the spectrum of research, we have to think there's so many points along that spectrum to do really good work. Fundamental discovery, how a gene works, can be important to a medical researcher. We may not see the importance now. It may take 10 years, it may take 20. It has happened many a time where a gene that was worked on in yeast or in Drosophila flies becomes a target of critical importance medically that helps cure a person's cancer. We don't always know how the pieces fit together in this big puzzle that's a spectrum. There's also a variety of ways that you can work in different labs and that relate to a research question directly or indirectly. So it can be studying a gene, studying a protein, studying a cell, studying small animal, what we call preclinical research, studying the nature of biology itself or how chemistry is put together can be important, right? Nanochemistry is super important for our nanomedicines. Then we get into things like experimentation, preclinical modeling. How do we model diseases? How do we then go from a model of a disease to a clinical trial, right? So medical technologies, new drugs, there's a huge change in the way we're conducting surveillance of patients, trying to make sure that with all the different comorbid diseases, how do we balance that equation? You know, there's not enough doctors and nurses in the world to sort of take care of each condition in every single patient in a defined way. So we actually need to build new technology tools. So that involves engineering and psychology for human factor development. And then we have, you know, another component, which is how do we then move those innovations into practice, right? So how do we commercialize them? How do we scale them up to serve the needs of a large population? So that's where the business community comes in. That's where, again, we have policy innovation that has to happen in health policy. We have to, you know, work with clinical trials. We have to work with government regulatory agencies. And so all of that spectrum ultimately leads us into looking at not only individual cases, individual diseases, but the population as a whole, the economics as a whole. So health economics and population epidemiology. So you can see from a gene to, you know, how the GDP of our economy runs with healthcare. It's a massive spectrum. It's all valid and important medical research. So whatever your interests are, whatever you're good at, whether it's accounting or pipetting or reading gene sequences and data informatics, reach out, find other people with like-minded interests, but don't be afraid that, you know, if somebody has doesn't have the same skill set or you think, oh, I can never do that. I was really bad at two things that I use all the time. One being math, calculus, and chemistry. I was terrible. I failed my first physical chemistry course. I only passed with a 54%. So physical chemistry is where you take calculus and chemistry and you combine it. I was so terrible at it. I use it all the time. Why? Because I'm able to hire and recruit people who are really good at physical chemistry or medicinal chemistry or biophysics to come work within my team. And so realizing that you don't have to be all things to all people, you can build a team of collaborators around you, or you can reach out to other labs that are specialized in certain ways to ask or answer a question that you might struggle with. So I think that's a common misconception collectively, that you know, somehow there's not a place for me, or that I'm limited by my own individual ability. You're not. It's a team sport.
Great answer, yeah. Anybody else? I know some of you are joining right now. We have been recording the session, so there will be a recording available on YouTube and on our channels too. But anybody else with any questions before we hop off? Or anything that you'd like to add or praise for a great presentation? No, I think you've shocked us all, Keith. Everybody's ready
maybe
to
I moved
go.
too fast, but
No, everybody's ready to go. Everybody knows exactly to go on our website and do all that. I'm going to send a follow-up email for you guys for our website and where you can find all the micro-credentialing that Keith was talking about. And our email is always open for any questions at all, or even if it's related to just something that Dr. Brunt works on. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer your questions. And if you're not sure where to start from, again, please reach out to us and we'll try to help as much as we can, or we'll refer you to other labs or partners that we know of.
And if you want a copy of this presentation, which includes the slide notes, which I have some extra like links and things. So for example, how to navigate to where those funding announcements are, I've included those in the notes page. If you want a copy of that in PowerPoint or PDF, just let Dana know, email the research at Impart team, you'll get a copy of this. So.
Okay, perfect. A lot of thank yous. So I think we're all good here. Keith, thank you so much again, and thanks everybody for being here. I hope you guys join us for our next session happening in June. I will send you follow-up emails for that too. All right, cheers.
We'll see you on the road.
Bye.